Hello everyone, in this video I wanted to talk to you all about the changes in Fortnite Battle Royale's v7.40 update and how they changed how the game is played. So basically I'm going to give you some tips for the game because these changes were very significant and the way they changed the game was very significant as well. So before I get into it, if you guys do enjoy this video, please do remember to give it a like rating, and if you would like to see more videos like this, comment down below letting me know that you enjoyed it. But yeah, basically I want to get into the changes in this update. The major changes are the HP. The way you get HP on kill changes how fights can be played out, and the material change and how that changes how fights can be played out, and then some other changes further down the line. Starting with the HP, you get 50 HP or shield back on kill if you kill somebody. This makes playing fights different. If you're third partying a fight and somebody kills somebody, you have to keep in mind that that person is going to have 50 additional health than they would otherwise. In the past, if you were third partying a fight, you would often be able to find a very weak opponent. But if that player didn't take much damage during the fight, or even if they did, they're going to have 50 more HP. So the probability of you finding somebody that's just an easy one-shot when you're third-partying somebody's fight is way lower than it was in the past. Also, keep in mind if you are third-partying the fight or just in any situation, if you're able to take a kill and deny an opponent that kill, not only are you getting health for yourself, but you're denying that opponent health. So stealing kills is more important now than I think it has ever been. Overall, there really isn't too much to go into with the HP change. It's a very good change. I think it incentivizes being aggressive and making plays, and it kind of reduces the penalty that was there for making plays, because if you take damage in a fight, you can replenish some of your health, and you're not just like as easily susceptible to third parties. So there really isn't much to go into with that. I just wanted to make note to tell you guys to be careful when you're third partying a fight. The next change, there actually is a lot to go into, the material changes. Basically, they made it to where you can only hold 500 of each mat type instead of 1,000, but you do harvest faster now. But you're not always going to be in a situation where you can harvest. And then like HP, you do get 50 of each material on when you kill an opponent, but it isn't granted to you immediately. It's not like you kill someone and then the material is instantly given to you. You have to loot it off their body. So that changes how things are played. Being able to loot kills and get material from them is very nice, especially in the late game, because you could spend way less time harvesting if you do get a decent amount of kills in the early game. No, if I said late game, but I meant early game. Being able to kill like 2 or 3 people early game and then come out of that with like 450 material of each is like really nice. The harvest rate is higher, but I would still try to use wood as much as you can. If you're not like building in a fight, like if you're just building around like to get to different things or whatever you're doing with your builds, try to use wood, because wood is the easiest material to replenish. There's pretty much trees everywhere or sources of wood, but there isn't rocks and cars everywhere. And then also trees give you more typically than rocks and cars do, even with the increased harvest rate. So I would still try to be more reserved with your stronger material. Obviously you can use it in a fight, and I would advise that because it's going to give you an advantage. And also, if you're building out of like metal and your opponent is building out of wood, it makes it easier to identify which builds can be edited, because if yours are metal and his are wood, like you know all the metals you can edit. Just a little tip there for you. But yeah, editing is a big part of the game. So, and I would always, advise using strong material if you're in a fight. But just keep in mind, if you're not building in a fight, try to use your wood, because you can replenish that easier. With the reduced material cap, you need to be more efficient with your builds, as well as knowing when to fight. Like people who just do like floor wall ramp everywhere, or like the quad layer ramp, whatever they're doing, if they just do that all the time, they're gonna run out of material. If you're fighting someone that isn't that good or isn't necessarily shooting back, just doing ramp wall will conserve a little bit of material and then also give you a bit of protection. If, like I said, if the person isn't that great, I often do floor wall. I still will do floor wall ramp if they are a good player, but you don't need to double ramp all over the place or do all those other like fancy builds, especially with this reduced material count, because you will be running out of materials really quickly. Also, knowing when to fight. If you just turn every fight into a build fight where you're spamming for high ground and your opponent is spamming for high ground, and neither of you are actually fighting each other, you're both going to run out of material pretty quickly and then leave yourself in a bad spot for the game as it goes on, especially if you're late game. If I'm late game and I see 2 people just like having an intent, like a really high build fight, not only could you potentially knock it down, even if they've like redeployed, they're wasting all their material. So it makes it really easy to clean them up in the late game. They all waste out their material. So there's nothing wrong with trying to dip out of a build fight or not letting build fights get as high, because the reduced material cap will leave you in a worse spot after you kill somebody. Sure, you do get mats if you're able to loot them, but it's only 50 of each. If you, let's say you had 1,500 mats, you had max of everything, and then you come away from that fight with like 300 and you're late game, and you're just in a bad spot compared to everybody else. Also, another thing for late game is try not to build as many bases. See, a lot of people build like towers, like 1x1s pretty high up, and that was a decent strategy in the past, but now you're using, what, like 50 material for an increment of height in a 1x1? So those players are wasting a lot of material. Use like a 1 level 1x1 in the late game if you do want to play in a base, unless you have to for some reason. But try to be conservative with your material as often as you can. Also on rotation, things like a rift to go or a launch pad will be able to save you a lot of material that you would have had to burn on rotation otherwise. So basically with material, try to be more efficient with your builds. Try not to get in as many build fights if you can help it, because if you run out of mats, you're going to run out of mats easier than you would in the past. And then also in late game, try to be more conservative with your material, because in late game, a lot of times you're not going to be able to loot your opponents and you're not going to be able to harvest anything. The next thing I wanted to talk about was the close range weapon like loadouts and how they have changed. The Deagle has been nerfed so that it can no longer one-shot walls when they're first placed. But the Deagle is still a very good weapon. I just think you need to complement it with either your AR for spray, so if you have a Scar, use that to spray down builds, or use Deagle, Pump, and SMG. The way I've been using my loadouts is I have my AR, I have a Deagle, I have a Pump, and then I have an SMG. And then if I find something like an RPG, a grenade launcher, a sniper, if I want to use one of those things, or if I want to carry something like a rift to go for late game rotation, then I drop the Deagle and just use shotgun and SMG. I think it is good to have something to spray out builds with, but the Deagle is still a very, very effective weapon. It is still good in like many situations. Deagle Pump is still a very deadly combo, especially if you catch your opponent off in a time when they aren't building, or if you edit a wall or something and they're not able to outbuild you because of that. If you like box them and edit them, Deagle Pump will drop someone very, very quickly. So I would still recommend if you're good with Deagle Pump, use it, but you have to be more, it's like different. With the way it was in the past, you could just Deagle out people's walls constantly, but now you actually have to outbuild your opponent and then punish them when you can with the Deagle Pump. Also, the fact the Deagle headshots are so brutal, if you can get one off in like mid to close range, 150 damage, can really swing the nature of a fight. The dual pistols are also very good. If you aren't a fan of the suppressed SMG, the dual pistols can be very effective, especially like pumping and using dual pistols and then switching back and forth between the two every time you shoot can be an effective strategy. I think the dual pistols are quite underrated. The suppressed SMG and the compact SMG are both good, but I just wanted to explain that the Deagle isn't gone. A lot of people come to my stream like, why are you using the Deagle? It can't break builds. It's still a very good weapon, and it's still a very good weapon in combination with a pump. Just want to keep in mind either spray builds with your AR, or carry an SMG to be able to spray builds, because there are times when spraying a build is pretty beneficial. The Deagle does do 100 damage to walls still, so if you do encounter a player turtling, and you pickaxe their wall or spray their wall with something else and get it down to 100 HP, the Deagle will one-shot it. And this actually catches a lot of players off guard, so you could Deagle the wall, replace it, and then edit a window. Whereas in the past, people are always prepared and used to the Deagle spams. People don't really respect the Deagle as much anymore. So if you do encounter a turtling opponent, doing something like that can work out. You just got to pickaxe the builds, like I said, to get it down to 100 or less, or shoot it with like your AR or SMG to get it down to 100 or less. But yeah, the Deagle is still very good, and I would still recommend using it. You just got to balance out your loadout to have something to combat builds. The next thing I wanted to talk about is how good supply drops are. If you guys don't know, in this update, they made it to where the RPG can no longer be found in chests, but it can be found in supply drops, and the rate that it can be found in the supply drops was increased. So the supply drops are going to be spawning the RPG more often than they would in the past. This gives you a huge advantage. If you're one of the only players in the lobby with an RPG, because it's really rare, people aren't as used to playing against RPGs, and just in general, I feel like everybody knows how good the RPG is. One thing I think a lot of people aren't considering is the reduced material count. Since everybody has lower mats, even if you don't accomplish anything with your RPG, other than making someone waste like 200 to 300 material, in a late game, that can be a pretty big advantage. If they've already made it late game and they might not have like the most mats, and then you're able to make them waste even more of their mats just by trying to counter your RPG, that can give you the edge you need in a fight without even necessarily doing any damage to the person. The limited material count makes mats really valuable, and if you're able to make your opponent spam out and to get rid of their mats like people often do when they're dealing with an RPG, could set you up well to win that fight. Another thing that's important to note in the supply drops is they pretty frequently spawn launch pads and rift to goes, which, like I was saying before when we were talking about material, the lower mat count makes these things have even more value for late game rotations, because you're able to conserve material and rotate and be like somewhat safe while also conserving material. Whereas if you didn't have the launch pad or the rift to go, you would have to build to like get to that location to avoid getting shot, and a lot of times would result in you running out of material. Or if you want to take high ground with a launch pad or the rift to go, conserve mats that way, whereas you won't have to spend the material to get up to the high ground. So supply drops are even more valuable than they ever have been. The RPG is an amazing weapon. You're more likely to get one out of a supply drop, and when you do get one, you're likely to be one of the few players in the lobby who has a supply drop, because I feel like people aren't headhunting the supply drops as much as they should. In solos especially, you can actually shoot them down really easily, the supply drops. A lot of people don't know this, but a while ago they made the supply drops health dependent on the game mode. So it has the least amount of health in solos, the median amount of health in duos, and then in squads it has the most health. But if you play a lot of solos like me, you can actually shoot down a supply drop really quickly and get it, and you don't have to wait around for it to drop. One final thing I wanted to note in this update is that the bush has been reworked. This is something I've talked about on stream, and a lot of people didn't know about it, so I wanted to mention it in this video. The bush no longer goes away with one shot, and the player still takes damage. If a player has a bush on and you shoot them, that shot will destroy the bush, but the player will not take any damage from that shot. So hypothetically, the bush gives you like an extra layer of protection, and if you're sniped while you're using a bush, that sniper shot will destroy the bush and make you take no damage. It feels very weird when I have the bush on and I don't like using it, but if you don't feel weird when you're using the bush, like you can still aim fine. I feel like it really throws my aim off. It makes it uncomfortable. But if you don't have that issue, the bush is an extra layer of protection, and I would definitely say you should use it because it is one of the best things in the game. Another thing to note is that planes, like we were talking about with the launch pads and the Riftigos, planes can be used for rotations to conserve material, but I don't want to talk about planes. But that's basically it for this video, guys. Like I said before, remember to drop a like and comment. Let me know what you think if you did enjoy this video or found it helpful in some way, and I can make more videos like this. Just kind of a collection of random tips for this update, because I thought this update was pretty massive in its effect that it had on the game. Like I said before, be careful when you're third-partying fights, because those players get more HP back after they kill somebody. Also, if you're weak in a fight and you can find a kill, that'll be really beneficial to you, especially late game. Material, be more efficient with what you're doing, and try to just keep that in mind at all times, how much material you have. If you don't have max brick or something and you're walking by a rock, you should get max brick, because having 1500 as a cap leaves players in an uncomfortable situation a lot of times in late game. But if you're more conservative and more aware of your mat count, I think you could still do just fine throughout an entire course of a game. And then finally, like I said, the changes to close range, the deagle is still very good, and make sure you're going for supply drops so you can get the RPG and launch pads. Thanks for watching, guys.